Well, welcome back everybody. Welcome back to the Appalachian Outfeed. I know it's been a minute since we posted up any videos. It's not that it's not been stuff going on, it's just not been stuff that's post worthy. I'm not sure you guys want to see me repack trailer bearings and run plumbing under the house and remodel bathrooms. Maybe you do, but too bad. So yeah, it's been a little while. Summer got past us, and we had about, I don't know, we had a few weeks of fall, and then within the space of 2 days it went to winter. Getting a little reprieve on that. It's been down in the 20s at night, highs in the mid to low 50s for the past few days, but it's warmed up a little bit. I think it's about 65 right now at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So we had a little blow come through here a few weeks ago, and it took down one ash tree behind me. There's 3 that are growing alongside of each other, and it broke all 3 of them out, but only one of them actually hit the ground. Got 2 of them hung up in trees, big old widowmakers, right next to where I was cutting. That was a lot of fun. Anyway, cleaned that up, and then the wife saw this one, so sitting here standing on top of a cherry tree that blew over. I think that was in a different storm, and I came out here to cut it up and hadn't really looked at it that well until I got out here, and my goodness, most of the trunk is back in a bunch of briars and I think dead poison ivy. So I'm gonna have to get the brush cutter out here maybe on a colder day when I can get bundled up and keep all the boogers off of me and ticks and everything else. Maybe get out here, brush cut it, and then cut the rest of it up. So we'll get on this top end with the MS500i in a little while, and we'll post that up. That'll be pretty quick. Won't be a whole lot of cutting on that. But what I've been wanting to do, and just have not gotten around to it, is my review on the 500i. So seems like everybody and his brother now has a review of the 500i out there. I should have done this last year, but I didn't. But I've got a little bit more time on the saw now, and not that a whole lot's changed. But so there you go. That's what we're going to get into today. Mostly is my take on this 500i. So just by way of background, I've been running saws, I don't know, 10, 15 years maybe, off and on, mostly off. But in the last few years, it seems like I've been running a saw. It doesn't seem like I have been running a saw quite a bit more. Barely a month goes by where I'm not cutting on something. Even during the summer, there were some things that I had to break the saw out for. But fairly light work. So it's mostly storm cleanup, cutting firewood, a good bit of firewood, and felling the odd tree here and there. Not a lot of timber falling. There may be quite a bit of that later on this winter. We'll get into that later. But as it sits right now, not a ton of falling. Maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 good sized trees at this point with this saw. But so I'm just your average saw user, right? I'm not on the saw all day, every day. I'm not a logger, I'm not an arborist. I'm just a guy that uses a saw around the farm to take care of things that need taken care of. But I think that gives me a pretty decent perspective for you guys, because I'm not a pro, and I probably use a saw about the same way most of you guys do. So that's my perspective on this review. That's where I'm coming from with this review on this 500i. So let me give you a little bit of information on my particular 500i. This thing was manufactured August of 2020. Yeah, that's right. Right in the height of COVID. I don't know if that means anything or not, but that is a manufacture date, 8 of 20. I bought this in about January of 21, and initially when I was running this saw, I was down south in a much warmer climate, and I do remember some of the first work I did with this saw was cutting up some pretty good sized oak tree trunks that had been blown over. Me and my neighbor had cleaned most of them up and worked them back to where there was just a little bit left, but I went in there and I cut out some cookies and just basically got the trunk back down to the stump as close as I could. I remember it was hot doing that as well, very hot temperature wise. During some of that and some other stuff that I had done, I had issues with hot starts on this saw. It would run for, that's what I thought it was, hot start issues. I'd run it and it'd run great. I'd turn it off to do something, come back to it a little bit later, go to crank it up, and man, you could pull and pull on this thing and it was not going to crank, and it was very frustrating. You talk about second guessing yourself. You know, did I make the wrong decision? I spent all this money on the saw and the stinking thing won't crank on the second tank of gas. I called it a one tank wonder there for quite a while. So that rocked along. That was an intermittent thing. That wasn't every time, and it rocked along for a little while. But like a lot of people, the more I ran the saw, the more I learned about it. And I think what I was experiencing and what a lot of other people experience, and they call hot start issues, it's really a lack of knowing how to run the saw. So when you crank the saw up, I always let it warm up for as long as I can stand, you know, a couple, 3 minutes. I'll be putting my chaps on or something like that. Get my ear pro on, get all my gear adjusted before I start revving it and start cutting. And I think the key to running this 500i and making it reliable is when you've been in a cut and you've been running it hard for a while, don't just finish a cut and then immediately kill it and cut it off. I think that computer maybe registers that, you know, that wide open throttle, and when you go to crank it, that's where it thinks it still is, and it's doing something with the fuel in there, and it's not letting it crank because it thinks it's at wide open throttle instead of trying to start. So my practice now is I'll let this thing sit and idle for, I don't know, 45 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes before I cut it off. And that seems to, I've not had any more issues since I started doing that. Coincidentally, that was also about the same time that I installed this MaxFlow air filter. I love this air filter. I think that was a really good purchase. Expensive for what it is and what you get, but it absolutely, I think, enhances the performance of the saw. Remember, any internal combustion engine is nothing more than an air pump. You're trying to suck air in and then push it out the exhaust, and that's where you get your power. So it's just a portable air pump. So the more air we can draw in, the more power we can generate, generally speaking. So that MaxFlow air filter, I think, was a really good purchase. That was one of my letdowns on this saw, was the air filter setup. You can see, I guess, some of these fine crumbs up here that stuck to the outside of the cover. That stock air filter, it seems like it would let a little bit of that past the filter, and it would get, you know, it's going to get sucked into the intake. So haven't experienced that with the MaxFlow, and part of that's a function of the fact that it's an oiled filter. So where the filter seals up around the little plate that it sits on, it's oil there, and that oil grabs all the little fines that try to slide by there, and does a pretty good job of that. Been really happy with that. About the time that I put the MaxFlow on was about the same time that I quit having an issue with the hot start stuff. That just went away. And I don't know if it's because it has something to do with the filter, or because I changed how I run the saw, or both. But that's been my experience with that part of it. So the hot start thing, it's out there on the internet. You don't hear that much about it anymore. And I think maybe that's a function of, again, people climbing the learning curve on that and figuring out what was going on. But I would not let that spook me off of this saw, the hot start issue. When I bought this saw, it came with a 28-inch bar, which is what I have on it now. I immediately went out and bought a Samara 32-inch bar, and lightweight bar, and I run that a lot on this saw, mostly on this saw. But somewhere, well, I know when it was, last year when I had the poplar tree, it was Palm Sunday. Poplar tree fell across the driveway. Well, that was the Sunday it broke off. Went out there a few weeks later to cut the rest of the tree down, and that 32-inch bar with this kind of wobbly suspension, plus the fact that the tree was cracked off, and I didn't have a place to dog into it, and I was just going to have to kind of freehand the face cut. I thought I'd be better off with the 28-inch bar. Turns out I think that was a pretty good call, and I've been running a 28-inch bar ever since. It's not a lightweight bar, it's just a regular steel bar, but I like the balance, and it does what I need to do with this saw mostly. I've cut one hemlock tree, again, the storm damaged tree that broke off, and had to go ahead and cut the stem down, and I needed that 32-inch bar to get across the base of the tree, so it came in handy there. And it's fine for bucking as well, but I like this 28-inch bar, so I'm going to keep running it. Probably, you know, that's probably going to be my default bar until I need a 32, and I'll throw that on there. A little bit less teeth to sharpen too when that comes around. So about this saw, what are the good things about it? So one of the coolest things about it, I think, and this is going to be personality dependent and experience dependent, this thing is really simple to operate. There ain't but 3 controls on the thing. That's the little fuel button, the primer bulb that you use, hit that thing about a dozen times before you start it, the kill switch right above it, and the throttle. That's it. That's the only controls you got on this saw. So it really dumbs down the operation. And for some of us, that's a good thing, just less fiddle factor. If you're somebody that likes to carry the little tiny screwdriver around in your pocket and twiddle with your high and low jet settings on this thing every time you go out in the woods, this is not the saw for you. This thing's got a computer, you crank it and you drive it, and that's really about it. There's just not much to operating this saw. Again, being mindful of the fact, yeah, let it warm up and let it idle down for a little bit before you cut it off. If you can manage that, you can run the saw. It's very simple and straightforward to operate, and I like that. The other thing with it, because of the way you crank it, again, you got the primer bulb on here, you mash that thing about a dozen times, you pull the cord, and you're up and running. Because that's the starting procedure, you can't flood this saw the way you can every other Stihl with the little choke settings on there. I learned early on about the Stihl pop and how to crank a Stihl saw without flooding it, because you flood that thing a time or two and you'll figure out real quick this is not something you want to do. But this thing is kind of idiot proof. You can't overpress the primer bulb, because as I understand it, you're priming up the fuel injector, whatever you want to call it, but any excess fuel just is shunted back off to the tank. So you can't really overdo it with the primer bulb, at least I never have. So you can't flood this thing like you can every other Stihl saw. Yep, and you gotta let it warm up and cool down. This is a very high-speed channel, and we only use the highest tech gear. These are my notes so I can stay on track here. Aside from ease of operation, what else about this saw? So Again, you're going to hear this on just about every review that's out there, and you're going to hear it because it's true, and that is the power to weight ratio on this thing. My goodness, this thing, for what it is, it is a beast. But with that, and you don't hear too much about this, it is a smooth running beast. And it's not, I'm not talking about the anti-vibration stuff on this thing. I'm talking about the engine itself. Man, this thing just purrs. It's like a Ferrari. It is smooth. It's powerful and smooth. If you ever run a piece of equipment that just has, you know, a lot of behind it, but it's smooth, that's what this is. Love that aspect of it. And then right there with that is, and you'll hear this on every other review as well, the throttle response. Man, you bump the trigger on this thing, it's going to go. And it really does. It revs up quick, which is nice. So, yeah, so that's kind of a rundown on the saw itself. I will say this, if you're out there looking to buy a saw, particularly one power head this size, get the full wrap if you can. I wanted a full wrap on this thing. The dealer didn't have it in stock when I bought it, so I got the half wrap. I think the full wrap is on my short list of things to get for this saw. That's about 200 bucks. You can shop around, but by the time you get done with it, it's going to be 200 bucks for the full wrap. Yeah, at the time I bought this saw, I couldn't believe the dealer even had one in stock. I went in the dealer to probably buy a 462, and long story short, this is what I walked out with. So what's the downside of this saw? Well, yeah, there's a snake in every woodpile, right? Well, nothing here is going to really surprise you. First off is the price. I think these things generally go for about 1,600 bucks, 1,600. That's a lot of, that's stock, box stock, not a ported saw. I think if you go to Ripsaw to buy this saw, it's going to be over 2,000 bucks ported from them. So price is definitely a barrier to entry. Again, this saw is not for knob twiddlers. If you want to, you know, pimp your saw, this is probably not the saw for you. There are plenty of bolt-on accessories you can get for this thing. Probably some worthwhile stuff that I don't have on it yet. So the Max Flow is absolutely worth the purchase. Again, full wrap handlebar if you can. Yeah, this clutch cover plate, clutch cover is I don't know, man. It's I feel like Stihl kind of under-engineered this thing. So you got Gordy over there at West Coast Saws, and he's got his billet aluminum clutch cover. I may be buying one of those down the road. And the best thing about that clutch cover, though, is that it lets you securely mount oversized dogs. I've seen reports of people mounting bigger dogs on this stock, and I think this is magnesium clutch cover, and you end up with cracks because you look at the little studs. There's just not a lot of meat on there holding this thing. You know, clearly Stihl was trying to keep the weight down on this saw, and they cut every bit of weight they could, and that includes kind of phoning it in on the clutch cover. So yeah, clutch cover, bigger dogs, if you're going to be doing any falling, I'd definitely take a look at. And then the exhaust. So you get your Max Flow, you got plenty of air coming in. It's probably a good idea to do a muffler mod on this thing and let it be able to exhale the way it needs to. So those may be some things that are down the road for me, but man, honestly, what you're doing at that point is you're trying to hot rod a Ferrari. Dude, this thing already runs. This thing screams. For me to put any more effort into getting any more RPM or performance out of the power head, I can see that if you're a production follower guy, or if you just got money to burn and that's just what you want, okay. But man, I'm telling you, this thing has plenty of power. Again, great throttle response. So messing around in the power head, to me, is really, man, I don't know. I don't see it. Maybe I just don't have that kind of money. You're just chasing, you know, you're chasing, oh, what's the word? Diminishing returns. You're chasing diminishing returns trying to work on the power head itself. But there are plenty of bolt-on performance parts for this thing. So overall, what do I think of the saw? Well, here's what it comes down to. If you can afford this thing, get it. It's one of these tools where every time you fire it up, it puts a smile on your face. It's just a pleasure to use. I really enjoy running this saw. Again, it cuts really smooth. I just really enjoy this saw. Which isn't to say that maybe like a 462 wouldn't be almost as good. But this thing has been so simple to use, so reliable. Once I got past that hot start issue, it's just been great. So yeah, would I do this again? Absolutely. If I had the funds to do it, I'd do it and not even think about it. All that being said, again, the most important part of the saw, the part of the saw that makes the most difference in performance and how it cuts wood is what, guys? It is the chain. So if you don't have a sharp chain on your saw, the power head becomes irrelevant, right? You can put a crappy chain on this great saw and you're not cutting wood. Conversely, as we'll see in a minute, you can put a well-sharpened chain on a just okay saw and you can go to cutting, you know, as long as the saw's turning the chain. If you got a sharp chain, you're good to go. So learn how to sharpen a chain. I'm not the best at it, but I'm learning, and I hope I'm getting better. All right, guys, well, that's it. I hope you got something out of this. Like I say, if you've been wanting a 500i and you got the bucks to do it, go ahead and jump in the deep end of the pool. I don't think you're going to regret it. So yeah, man, do that and sharpen your chain. Got any thoughts or anything I overlooked, any questions, throw them down in the comments below. And if you've hung in with me so far, hit that like button and maybe think about subscribing. All right, so we're going to get busy with the MS170 on this the top end of this cherry tree, and we'll see you guys then.